Okay.
Okay, I get this committee of a whole meeting regarding budget started. Roll call, Julie?
Trustee Hargett,
Here.
trustee Levin,
Here.
trustee Marabella,
Here.
trustee McCarthy,
Here.
trustee Weiss,
Here.
trustee Whitmore,
Here.
Mayor Bruno.
Here. Thank you. Start out by thanking staff for putting together this budget and department heads as well. It's been a very unique year. I hope I never see another year like this in my years as the mayor. So it's not, and it turned out to be better than anticipated. So with that, I'll turn it over to Village Administrator Greg Jackson to go into detail on the budget.
Thank you, Mayor and Village Board members. To give you a brief overview of the package that I sent, the documents I provided you are working documents for the general fund as well as the enterprise fund. The restricted funds will be compiled into the final draft of the budget for approval. Those restricted funds include TIF, police forfeiture, FICA, insurance, IMRF, audit, tourism, promotion, MFT, DLA LESO. We're starting 2 more restricted funds, Toys for Tots and softball, to segregate that money, bring it out of the general fund and put it into the fund where it can be effectively used for those programs. Upon the board's completion of this evening's review, I and staff will proceed to make the adjustments directed by the village board. The documents will then be incorporated into the master budget document that'll include the complete narrative, transmittal letter, organizational chart, fund descriptions, department descriptions, capital purchase and progress purchases and project requests, current debt service, a line by line, department by department expenditure justifications, as well as a village staff personnel cost worksheets. This is probably one of the most extensive detailed budgets that have come across the desk of the village board in some time. And our intent was to make sure we provided the board with as much information and the public with as much information as possible as we move forward with the budget process. I will also move forward with the fiscal year 21-22 wage policy ordinance to be presented concurrently with the budget for adoption. And once that budget is adopted, I will utilize the same for drafting the state mandated appropriation ordinance. You'll find that in the packages, I've provided you with a significant amount of detail. Again, I wanted to make sure the village board had an abundance of detail for decision making. I also provided the board with information related to cash on hand as well as debt service. And just yesterday, I provided the board with even significantly more detail regarding village debt service, which was compiled by Pat DePercio. A quick note about cash on hand. I am told this is the first time in recent memory where the village did not have to end the year by opening a line of credit for operating expenses. During a most uncertain and challenging fiscal year, this is a credit to both the senior staff and the village board's fiscal conservatism at a time when it was most needed. I would like to provide you with a brief snapshot as to senior staff's budget preparation. Staff was provided a baseline budget number. That baseline budget number was the same amount of expenditures approved by the village board for fiscal year 2021, reminding the board that this was a budget developed during the early months of the pandemic with projected revenue shortfalls. Staff then provided justification and explanation for each individual expenditure line in their respective budgets. Staff then provided justification and explanation for all requested expenditures that exceeded the provided base number. Personnel worksheets were completed for each department, providing detail for each staff position to include senior staff, management, non-union staff, and bargaining unit staff. Just a reminder for the public as well as the village board, the village has 4 collective bargaining agreements, 3 of them with the police department, 1 of them with public works. Your package of the budget data begins with the general fund revenue estimates for fiscal year 2021 and projections for fiscal year 21-22. Revenue estimates are expected to exceed the fiscal year 2021 budget by a modest $2,661. From the outset of and during the fiscal year, we were looking at a potential deficit or expenditure reductions of $578,000. We aggressively sought after CARES grant funding to offset the potential deficit and received $300,000 in cash. However, still facing a $278,000 deficit, we aggressively managed controllable expenses to end the year with an estimated $70,000 deficit without the sale of property nor the necessity to take out revenue anticipation loans. The $70,000 will be absorbed by the village reserve, which so far has been untouched this fiscal year and created by this administration and board for just such an emergency. Making an adjustment to your documents, the fiscal year 21-22 revenues are projected to increase by to $4,743,075. You will note that this is an increase of just over $35,000 from the original package I gave you. Trustee Hargett, during his review of the budget, noted that there was a typographical error with the marina revenues, elevating those from $6,000 to $41,726.
Line item 3450, correct? Under the general fund?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I also
Just want
want
to make sure everybody makes that correction.
I also
Great.
want
If I write it 6,000, it should be 41,726.
I also want to note that the revenues also include $715,000 in grant funding for Holdridge and the Public Works Building. This, in essence, are pass-through funds. So we end up with working funds of $4,028,075. It's $4,028,075. If the village board elects to hold firm on the baseline budget numbers, whether outright freezing department requests above the baseline numbers or freezing the overall general fund baseline numbers and adjusting by department, we are projecting a fiscal year 21-22 budget surplus of $58,544. If the village board elects to move forward with the department request above the baseline, the village is projected to end fiscal year 21-22 with an up to $612,866 deficit, requiring the immediate identification for funding sources to offset the budget gap. With that being said, I will offer the following information as it relates to expenditures by department, and I will stop after each of those departments for any questions or discussion for the village board. Department 05 Community Development is projected to be 1% below budget this year at a total amount of $1,621. The department is requesting an increase of $34,099, which is a 1% increase. It's to offset the salary increase that the village board already approved for the promotion of Pat DePercio to come in and pick up some additional responsibilities related to finance. And it's also for the recommendation to hire a part-time code enforcement official at $25,000. Again, that's part-time without benefits. I pause there for any questions or discussion from the board.
The increase feels like a no-brainer that we already voted and approved that. I'm surprised that's not already included in the base number. So I think that since we already approved that needs to be included. The code enforcement is one that, I mean, that can occupy a lot of time. I think philosophically, we've always had the approach of compliance over, just running around finding people. I know there are some neighboring communities that in the last few years have hired people on kind of with the, I think the philosophy of, well, as a code enforcer, you have to pay for yourself. And I don't think, at least for me, I won't speak for anyone else. I don't think that's where we're at, that we just want to go around finding people, but the need is still there to be identifying code violations and trying to address it and working with those property owners to move towards compliance. But this is one that I do support. I realize that the state of the budget, I think we should work our way through, but we'll just express now as we hit on it that this is one that I support trying to move forward.
Fairness, I believe also, and you guys can tune in on this, we've been using the community service officer for a lot of this stuff. I mean, we've done stuff when people called in, but the community service officer drives around and looks for different things. This would open him up to do his job more better, and it would create a position where that person knows exactly what they're looking for, what they want to proceed with, bring it to us, and then we enact fines or what have you, like I said. So I think it's important to do this because then there's a person who's accountable for just this, and that's his job solely. my opinion.
I had a question on that. In addition to what Trustee Marabella said about kind of covering what the CSO is doing, is that covering any other staffing gaps that we've had recently when it comes to that? What is the history just for the last couple of years as far as code enforcement?
Code enforcement has basically been a complaint-driven function. There hasn't been a chance to mentor, for lack of a better term, businesses who might be new and not familiar with some of our codes or taking a different approach outside the village ordinances. So it's been complaint driven. Sometimes we would send the CSOs, keeping in mind that the CSO function, CSO entity is pretty much defunct with this last budget. We do have an individual who is going out when there needs to be, if a dog's out or if there is something pressing issue. But in essence, that person's full-time position is records clerk. So when there's a call, if Pat's not available, I'll go out, or when I'm through town, I will turn around and look, note things, bring it back to see if there's if permits have been pulled, if various things have been addressed in regards to a given property or a given violation. Pat responds to all complaints that get into the office. That's providing they get into the office. So pretty much that's what we've been doing. We want to look at I know we're going to have this vision and strategy session in May, but one of the things that we want to talk about is the appearance of Sheridan Avenue or Sheridan Road and how we turn around and address some of those issues, again, from seeking compliance versus penalty and being able to address that. But limitations on staff certainly has, we had a pretty robust code enforcement group over a year ago, which is now gone because of reductions that had to be made in restructuring. This is a tool in the toolbox that we can, to echo Trustee Hargett, as long as we use it properly, can be valuable to us as we move some of these initiatives forward.
The other thing I would add is, Pat, from his experience and just that Canadian cool, I think he is really good at the relationship building, but it becomes challenging to be out there trying to talk about incentives and development and business growth and how do we come alongside while at the same time also being the person going out saying, hey, you're out of compliance here and potentially leading to fines. It's tough to wear both of those hats well.
But I think at this present time with Pat taking on other responsibilities, I mean, you can't put something else on his plate to be going out doing that if we can possibly find someone part-time to do that for him. But yeah, I agree with compliance over fines too. But yeah, he's got a lot of stuff. I don't know how he does what he does, to be honest with you. And this summer it's going to get very busy for him up in the building.
Well, between Pat and Greg, I have never seen so many numbers come across my desk as I did before. And I really appreciate this because this is the first time I've ever seen financial paperwork and with the numbers that come in. We've never had this in the past, prior to Greg and Pat doing all this. So I really appreciate all this information coming in.
One of the things, thank you, Trustee. One of the things that this village board charged me with when I came on board was to look at how we use our most valuable asset, which are our people, the human capital within the village. And you don't flip a switch and make a decision, but I can tell you certainly without hesitation that the village is better served financially and a better use of its money by capitalizing on skills that Pat has that were underutilized, and we're being occupied by being a code enforcement officer to some extent. And what we've come to find out is that, and I think we made an excellent decision by the move we made, was to discover that we had a resource there that was not being tapped, and now we're able to tap it. So. There's nothing else with community development, and then I'm going to move on to administration. Administration is projected to be a 1% below budget, $2,954. No increases requested in the budget. The budget requested, in fact, is 6.5% below the current budget year, $34,955. Also, there are no capital budget requests for this department either. There was a $50,000 capital budget request for community development for exterior painting that we're going to, if the board's so inclined, it's not a priority capital expenditure in comparison to other capital expenditures. So.
And we're going to wait one more year on that, correct, Craig?
We'll carry it over if that's what the board decides, yeah.
Okay, it's not a priority, I agree.
No questions about administration. I'll go on to Department 11, Police Department. It's projected to be a $55,331 overage, exceeding budget by 3.9%, which falls less than the appropriation, but it's still over the fiscal year budget. The police department's requesting an increase of $195,574, or a 12.5% increase. This increase is to offset expenses beyond the baseline number for payroll, including collective bargaining increases, vehicle maintenance of $14,000, additional training, some state mandates of $19,000, equipment contracts and leases, $40,595,000, and 4 vehicle leases of $38,949. Bringing that, it should be noted by the board from the last budget cycle that when the budget was presented to the board and approved by the board, we had asked the police department, well, we had directed the police department to offset expenses going to the taxpayers by utilizing funding in both Restricted Fund 18 and Restricted Fund 62, 18 police forfeiture and 62 DLA lesso. They took those sums of money that were above the baseline and allocated them to those various funds. Those funds have been depleted to a great extent. There is some money remaining in the police forfeiture fund, which the department will utilize for capital, for equipment purchases and other things that statutorily they can. But again, they're asking for a $195,574 increase.
And awkward silence. So the one request on there is salary regarding bringing on a full-time CSO, but I know you referenced that currently the person acting as the records clerk is also then, when those CSO responsibilities come up, they're dealing with that. So are we taking that request off?
No, it's a full-time records clerk, trustee. I think what we've shown, what they've done at the police department is spent the money in payroll. There was payroll allocated for the records clerk, but that records clerk stepped down. They allocated, they used those funds for the day-to-day operations, whatever the case may be. And now in order to retain their records clerk / CSO, whatever we want to call that person, but it's predominantly a records clerk. They need the funding in order to do that. Otherwise, they're going to have to make an adjustment elsewhere in staff or someplace else to pick up the salary or forego the records clerk.
Is that a full-time position, benefits included?
It is.
I think-
To be clarified, it's an existing position too. It's not a new position.
Yeah, didn't we have like 3 CSOs at one time when things were good and then things went down, and
Correct.
when we were shortening everybody's budget, we got rid of everybody, I believe.
Right, we got all the CSOs were furloughed or they were they resigned or they left because we had to cut back on those positions. So Ricardo does do other duties besides the records clerk. He does do the bank runs every day for Village Hall, and he does go do CSO work as far as building code violations and things like that as necessary. I would say probably about 8 hours a week he spends doing other duties besides the records clerk. So we used to have a part-time records clerk and Ricardo working in there, and now we've eliminated the records clerk. Well, when the records clerk left, Ricardo took over that position entirely. So we actually have one person now doing records, and the previous person was doing it 4 days a week, with Ricardo working at least 2 or 3 days a week, and now he's taking it all and doing it himself, which, you know, we're pleasantly surprised. And he still does have time to do some other items, you know, whether it's go out and help with catching a dog and bringing tickets and evidence to court and to the crime lab. So he is utilized, you know, more than just in the records clerk's position. That's why we're kind of calling it a records clerk / CSO.
And so he's going to maintain his position and we're bringing in a new position, or this is just?
No, we're not at, I think Pat was looking to hire an additional person under his purview
Absolutely.
to handle code
So
enforcement.
you're just adding this on your line item, but that CSO could also assist if anything went wrong with a code enforcement.
Well, look,
situation.
Trustee Marabella, we all work together. So for example, there's been enforcement action and I don't want to name you know, the person or the street, but you know, we initiated, if it rises to the level of needing an investigation, then of course we utilize, you know, a detective, and that's what we did. And we even contacted an outside agency to assist on this particular case, and they did. And I think we're going to have a resolution that the village and I know the neighbors will be happy with. So it's not always just, you know, for code enforcement, a simple CSO. I think, and I don't want to speak for Pat, but there are things that need to be looked at and permits to be checked and a lot of that work that in answer to all the questions here, no, Ricardo, would not have time to do all that. So he's more reactionary than proactive. And I think maybe what we're looking for is somebody who could handle those duties of code enforcement in a more proactive manner.
So we'd be, you're so I'm just a little confused. We're going to add that position. This is going to be a new position.
No, this position is the records, in essence, is the records clerk position. It is not going to serve at code enforcement. It is an existing position.
So is he on the current, but why are we allotting then? I guess I'm confused. I'm
No,
sorry.
I'm
Why
gonna,
are we allotting this dollar amount if it's already there?
well, and didn't we say that there was a position, we got rid of it, those expenses were used for something else, and now we're having to re-add the position?
The position never went away. The position was a part-time records clerk position. Ricardo did the other part-time end of the records clerk position, as well as part-time CSO. What changed was the part-time records clerk left. We did not backfill the position.
Gotcha.
So now we have just one full-time. We didn't backfill the part-time. So now, but those funds, to going back to what Trustee Whitmore was saying, were used in the police budget, however it was used, and it was probably on payroll because that's where bulk of the overage was. And so now they need to turn around and in order to meet, or because they're going to exceed their baseline, this position was not allocated in the baseline budget. And because it wasn't allocated in the baseline budget, the decision rests with the board if they're going to either allow that money for this position, or if in fact they're going to say, okay, if you want this position, you got to take it out of your baseline budget.
And this is the Ricardo position, or this is an additional position?
No, this is the Ricardo position. That's correct.
Okay, so he's listed on the fiscal year budget. So not every person listed on the budget request is part of the baseline budget.
That's correct. That is correct. And there's only a few like that, Trustee Hargett. So the question is, they want Ricardo to fill that half slot that resigned and went to another position and went to another job, and then fill the half that Ricardo was doing. Simple thing is take the phrase CSO out of this. That's the best thing to do. The CSO should be removed, and he's a records clerk. and the record clerk has different functions.
And so on the budget request, so that's the 37,794 for that full-time position then is the request.
I'd have to hang on 1 second and go to that in the police department's payroll line. That's where I'm assuming you're looking, right, trustee?
It is, and
Yeah,
that, actually that was salary only. So I guess if you go across with benefits and training, it's 57,888.
Yeah, the 37,794 will affect the line in the budget, as will the 3201 under the retirement for IMRF. Yeah, and the workers' comp comes out of another fund, as does Social Security. But that's the total cost of ownership, for a lack of a better phrase, on that individual is 57,888.
Unfortunately, I think for me, I understand the need for these things, but I think for all of the above base requests, it's a matter of finding that in the existing budget and really having to prioritize and make those decisions within the baseline budget.
If that ends up being the direction of the body, then the police department is going to have to either decide to forego items in that 194,574 or switch things up with what's in the regular baseline budget, if I'm understanding you correctly, trustee.
That's my opinion. Is I'll leave it to the chief and that team on how to prioritize and what the needs are. But I think it's still working within the baseline budget. But that's just me. Feel free to speak up.
Anybody else have any ideas? I agree with Trustee Hargit, I do. But how about anyone else?
No, that's kind of why I asked if it was a new thing or what we were doing. And I know everybody needs anything and nobody's picking on a certain department, but I believe at the end of the day, we look and see, and if we can't, and you come back and you present the case, well, I believe this board is good enough to look at it. We're not saying no, we're just saying, try to scratch it out, see what you can do, come to us with the information, and we'll debate it back out then.
So just so it's understood, that 82,000 is only that, the position for Ricardo only incorporates a small amount, well, not a small amount, but a portion of that. There's other portions to that, including the maintenance costs that we incurred last year due to COVID. We had to have a maintenance person working. And then also that incorporates the salary increases that were approved by the board. So it's not just that one position.
No, I think what the trustees are saying, Mike, are to turn around and take the whole $195,000 that you're looking for in above baseline requests and figure out which ones are a priority, incorporate whatever dollar amounts you think are appropriate into the baseline budget, removing other dollars to offset that expense to come into the baseline budget. If I'm hearing the board correctly.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Hey, Alana, are you talking? It looks like you are, but I can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Doesn't show you as muted.
No, it doesn't.
I blame Dane.
No, Zoom has been goofy the last couple of days with this. I encountered this earlier today and in a meeting last night. Wait, is she gone completely?
I think she's going to come back on.
trying to come
Trustee
back on.
McCarthy, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm not like completely understanding like everything right now and what we're looking for. So I think just going with the feedback, for everyone to look at it, for Greg to consider it and to come back with it. So I I got distracted a little bit, so I'll admit. So I'm not completely, so I do think I missed out on a piece of it, so I apologize.
Okay. Trustee Whitmore's back. Are you?
No,
Can't hear you.
no voice.
Trustee Weiss, what do you think? On
Well,
that?
I agree. It's, it's like, I mean, these are hard choices,
They are.
and it's really tough. I mean, the reason my background picture is the way it is because everything's out of this world. And it's not the first time, that I've been through this personally myself with the companies that I used to work for. And I'll tell you, for any department head to make these tough choices, it's not easy, but it's got to be made because at the end of the money, there's too much money. Really, we just don't, where are we going to get the extra money? That's the thing. And unless there's something that happens, in the next year that we'll be able to get it. But right now, as I foresee it, with the property tax increase that we imposed and everything else, it's really a drop in the bucket with everything else that we got to do.
Hey, Dane.
Hope you can hear you now.
Hear you, Alana.
Oh, sorry, Dane. Never mind.
Now you're muted.
Sorry, I had to run downstairs. I was trying to get tech support. No, what I was mentioning earlier is someone had mentioned about the full amount, the 82. And I just mentioned that I think Ricardo's position is over half of that amount. That's why I was looking at cutting the entire amount out to see where we could find those funds elsewhere.
Well, part of that 82, is it not the 2% that we agreed with the union?
Yes.
So we can't take that out.
No, that's got to stay. In fact, no matter what, if the board is not going to approve anything above the baseline, that money has to go back under the baseline because we have that agreement with the union. We can't not honor that agreement.
Absolutely not. I mean, so that amount, whatever that may be, has to stay in there.
And has to
Whatever the
go,
difference
and has to, quite frankly, go into the baseline, Mayor, as Trustee Hargett had suggested.
Yeah. So they have to absorb not only the salary, but the 2% increase.
That's correct.
That's tough. But, it's got to be done.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not written in stone. We're not etching this in stone. We're right on the first parts of the budget here. We're just expressing our opinions that this is what we're looking for to be fiscally, responsible. That's all. We're not saying no, we're saying, look at it, see what you come up with, and
Right.
that's what we're gonna do.
I should have, I was going to hit this later, but probably now is a good time to bring this up too. No matter what we do that's beyond, a projected revenue savings or a surplus of $55,000, we're going to have to find a way to pay. So we're going to have to come up with some source of revenue. Perhaps we'll have some money come in through this rescue plan. We're waiting to see if that comes in. The board needs to decide what's the best way to use that money. But again, I say this, if we're doing anything that's going to have long-term costs or recurring costs associated with, whatever money comes in as a one-time revenue stream is a one-time revenue stream. Whatever we end up having here, if we don't build a surplus or additional funds going into the next fiscal years, how are we going to pay for it?
If we happen to get a surplus, I don't want to keep nipping at that surplus till it's gone either.
So whatever we do above the $55,000, whatever the board decides is the appropriate thing to do, we've got to make sure that we also look at accompanying that with money. Two things I'll bring up is that though we're hopeful with future negotiations on the landfill based off recent conversations with Swalco, that money's finite. So, I mean, there's nothing saying that the new company has to come back to the table and do anything with us for money of about $300,000, $400,000 a year. That's been part of our revenue stream for going back to 2000 or beyond. So that money, we should be considering as we move forward that money is finite. that it may not, it may not continue going forward. We may get some kind of lump sum again, but then that's it. It's a lump sum. Anything that continues as a recurring cost associated with payroll, legacy costs, things of that nature are still going to have to be paid for down the line. Also of note, and I think some of you may have received communication, not only from myself, but the Illinois Municipal League, is that the governor is seriously giving a look at reducing the local government distribution by 10%.
Oh, the sales tax, correct?
The local government, our distribution, our funds, the state's going to look at reducing that by 10%.
Right now, they take 2%, correct?
So, go ahead, Buddy's chomping at the bit.
Okay, go ahead.
So, and I know why. So, but it's I only place that out there so the board recognizes that some things are outside of our control. There are some things that we hope for in revenue streams that are simply outside of our control. We're at the mercy as a non-home rule community to just get what's given to us to some extent.
Make do with what we get.
Yep. All right. Anything else on the police end before I move on to Department 12?
Yeah, on police capital requests, remind me where the legislation ended up regarding body cams. Is that a requirement yet, or just something we have to have on the radar for a future expense?
Yeah, we have to have it on the radar for future expense. It's according to the Justice statute or act that was signed by the governor. It was a breakdown on communities of size and when they would have to be able to have these body cams. We are slated for, I believe, 2025 community our size. I also understand that a trailer bill is either introduced or being discussed right now to supplement that first piece of legislation signed by the governor with a funding mechanism to go out to the communities. Now, I don't know if that funding mechanism is complete payment for every community that's mandated for this, or if it's a grant system for applying for the cameras. But also let me say this, the camera's purchase is a camera purchase. That's not the cost. The big burden cost, or the big cost is storage, replacements of cameras, different type of data devices that, Mike Sheedy can speak more in more detail down the line. But at that capital request, Trustee Hargett, we are not required right now to purchase it. However, that being said, there are opinions on how that tool is valuable for protecting against liability and protecting the interest of the police officer that is out on the scene on a call, and how that can be utilized to benefit the village's position in potential litigation.
And the cost of insurance.
And the cost of insurance. Thank you, Bob.
That's a very big factor about whether you're going to be able to even get insurance if you don't have a body cam program in place.
Right. Good point. Yep.
Okay. We'll go on then to Department 12, Fire Department. Projected at $42,660 exceeding budget. That is not a 47% increase. Your eyes were deceiving you. I wanted to put I put a very, 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 very small decimal in there. You just can't see it. It's 4.7%. They're requesting an increase of $411,000, 32%. Salary increases for staff. I provided you with the paperwork that Chief McCoy provided me. It's $118,260. Vehicle maintenance of $30,600. We certainly know that from past discussions regarding the engine that from the committee that Trustee Levin and Trustee Weiss were part of. Paramedic contract and engagement of a consultant to evaluate service delivery. I was talking to Trustee Hargett. I think we can bring that $30,000 for the cut for the consultant, looking at how we're going to provide services in the future, below $30,000, but I'm not ready to commit to a firm number on that yet. The 232,160 is greatly attributed to the contract with Metro for the paramedic service. Where the issue comes into play is that when Chief Street presented the proposal for Metro, the Metro contract, the cost to the village, the difference in the cost to the village was only supposed to be $70,000 because it was going to be offset by payroll. He said payroll that we would normally be paying out during out of the payroll line would now go to the outside services line, the other professional services line. It would be augmented by $70,000, roughly $71,000 for the to offset the expense that couldn't be offset on the payroll line. So those are the numbers in front of the board. I know that we are going to have somebody take a look at how we provide services in the fire department, what services, call volume. We've already begun some data analysis on a bunch of data that Chief Street had provided me. So I have some of that data that I've worked on. Chief McCoy's provided me with data regarding ambulance fees and things of that nature. So, you know, we're got a strong look at the data. We got some strong data to have that consultant or whoever take a look at, but that's where we're at right now, board. I'll also touch quickly on the capital requests. Capital requests include the deputy chief's replacement vehicle. I would ask that we hold off on that. I want to review that with Chief McCoy. I would suggest to the village board that if we can get a vote for $40,000, it's an opportunity we should not pass up. And I think that we would add it to the budget, and we certainly just not spend it until, and not authorize any spending on that until we know, you know, we've got the boat and then we can secure it. That money's almost restricted within the fire department's operating fund. But, you know, we've been a year, Alicia, a little more than a year without a boat now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, it has been.
yeah, it's been a little while. We've been a little while without a boat.
Yes,
Yeah,
you're
so
correct.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I think that, and you know, we looked at grants. We couldn't get it through the AFG grant when we tried that one time. We went to IDNR, and IDNR just wasn't anxious to give up a boat. The director may have been, but the police, the conservation police, were not. The chief has assured me that this boat is, they've already done the research. It will meet the needs of our dive team out there on the water. Let's hope that the marina continues to remain busy and you know, continues to have successful years down there, attracting people into that end of to that side of the community. And maybe someday they'll find their way into the town, and we'll reap the benefit of that. But I don't think activity is going to slow down out there. And we do have a certified dive team. And it kind of just makes sense that if we've got that dive team, we should have a boat. I've long advocated for that once I got here, and Dick Robards wouldn't let me get out of the office until I committed to him. I would turn around and try to look for a boat. But so my recommendation on the board, and what I'd like to do, is include that into the fiscal year budget, but only based on monies being there.
This a military style dive boat, or is it going to be a conventional style dive boat? Is it so it's easy?
It's a old police boat.
Okay. So it's a hard structure instead of soft.
Well, no, it's soft on the bottom, but it's got a hard inner core with where you're driving from and stuff.
Nice.
It is a float, you know, a blow up boat.
Nice.
It's yeah, it's pretty big. I can't remember exactly how long it is off the top of my head. But it was a police boat here in Illinois and now it's over in Michigan. So it's a little older, but it looks like it's in good condition. And we've talked over there to the people who own the boat, and they say that, you know, they put new motors in on it. It's a double motor boat. And they said that, you know, they thought they were of the opinion. We haven't gone over and saw it yet. We want to do that before we commit to purchasing this. But, you know, it looks like it's a pretty good deal for what we need and for what we, you know, can afford.
Regarding the ambulance and the engine, we still have, I think, a year left on the lease on the ambulance. You know, my recommendation to the board is that we take a look at when one lease expires, picking up another lease. It's kind of difficult for us as a village to incur that debt service for 2 ambulance leases at the same time. We'll also be looking at applying for the AFG grant. I've had discussion with Chief McCoy on, there was a hiccup with the grant this year on the AFG grant, which is what we were looking for. And we believe we would have made a pretty solid case for an engine based on the age of our fleet. But we're going to have to wait because of the big ticket item that engine is to next year to apply for the AFG grant. That being said, we're going, the maintenance costs that the fire department's looking for and to a great extent is to repair the existing engine that's there so they can keep that up and running until a new engine comes. So when the board makes its decision on the expenses above the baseline, I would just offer that the stay on the capital purchases for the engine and the ambulance, we're going to need to do something, or at least take a serious look at how we're going to pay for the maintenance of the existing engine.
The maintenance is at 30,600.
That's correct.
That includes more than just the one engine. It includes what's wrong with the engine, and then the truck needs tires, so that 30,000 includes those tires. 1731 also needs a shock repair. We have a broken shock on there, and that's in there. And then there was some 1742, which is our older ambulance. We have some transmission and electrical problems we'd like to get taken care of also. So, and that's all included in that extra amount.
The amount to fix 1742 is in that 30,600.
Yes. Yes.
I would say that would be a priority because, you know, if these things don't run, we're going to have a problem.
But not only that, but 1711, I mean, 700 gallons a day you're losing. I mean, that's amazing.
I mean, that's a lot of money right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then we're either going to have to figure, again, we've got a $55,000 cushion for whatever that's worth. If we, through the aggregation of whatever the board's going to give a nod on, if it's beyond that 55, we're going to have to turn around and find a place to fund it. Just either that, or we're going to, no matter what I would say is that if the board is going to make the decision to keep everybody at baseline with the numbers they presented this evening in their budget, we're going to have to take that 30,000 and figure out where we're going to put it into the baseline budget, but then there would be some loss on the baseline budget for other things. So
I think we stay with doing the same thing for each department if we can do that within the baseline.
And then, but what we're going to do then, if I hear the board correctly, we're going to make that engine a priority, the repair maintenance on the engine, right? Am I correct?
I think first out vehicles would be the priority for maintenance. And then if you can still work in the second out, then within the baseline, then do that as well. And then I think the other one for me would be the consultant to try and figure out what's this thing going to look like in the future. And if we can do that in-house, great. But if that's something where we need that outside expertise, then I think when we had talked back with Chief Street, I mean, that's a needed next step.
Yep.
You know, when you think about it, 700 gallons times whatever the amount of money per gallon it is, that, you know, in a year's time, that gets to be a lot of money.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. It's a lot of money lost in gasoline.
Yeah, just on
Amazing.
that, just alone.
That many gallons a day. Holy moly.
Well, and
Not
probably a
only-
lot of staff frustration with having to keep dealing with that.
Right.
Yeah, actually, my guys are looking at it and we're trying to find, because apparently there's more than just one leak in there. And so they're trying to, tighten up what they can, and we're replacing gaskets, but we still have a significant leak that's happening. So
I mean, duct tape, did you try duct tape?
Duct tape.
not yet, and I haven't tried that water seal that they sell.
Next tape.
Out of you can make a boat out of a screen door. We haven't done that yet either.
So
But that's next.
ultimately, I'm gonna have every department head meet with me again that has an over the baseline budget to make sure we're clear on where they've got to turn around and tighten and, where they're gonna find their money from. And that's it for fire right now, unless the board has any other questions. Okay, 13 Public Works Streets. Projected to be 129,370 or 20% over below budget, but keep in mind that is just based on the numbers there. It's more of 29,370 because that $100,000 that was budgeted this year for Holdridge,
Right.
just being shifted to the next
Right.
year. It didn't come in, it didn't go out. So from a true sense, just reduce that by $100,000. No increase was requested in the budget. The budget request was 63,691 below, 9.5%. Streets has no infrastructure needs. They never do. Okay, I'm only kidding. And we know that there's going to be some work based on the LPA funding out of motor fuel tax. That's already been looked at and approved by the board. Tim had presented that to the board a while ago. I know, Mr. Mayor, we had a long discussion with that. Where he's looking at $3,904,000 in capital funds, in capital improvement funding, with 855 coming from capital improvement funds and 10,000 from the operations budget, the rest being supported by grant funding. And certainly that $10,000 can fall into the budget, the operations budget for the crack sealing. Okay. No questions because he's coming in at budget. He's not coming above baseline. So keeping in mind, when you look at that number, that budget, you have that $1.3 million. Just please, I remind the board and the public that 1.3 is a one-time deal because it's the 715,000 for the grant funding coming in and going out. So 100,000 on Holdridge, 615 on
Public Works Building.
Public Works Building. That's correct.
All right.
Parks and Recreation projected to be 18,321 or 8.8% below budget. They're requesting an increase of $34,723. $11,000 on that is for staff. And about $19,000 are for some maintenance issues, resurfacing the skate park, seal coating the west parking lot, and then taking care of outside surfaces. The increase in staff comes from this. In discussion with the insurance company and subsequent discussion with Scott Fuller, I come to find that with a question being asked of, do we have coverage in our facilities when they're in operation by village employees? So if the Schlater Center is open, do we have an employee there in case there's an electrical outage? If there's, fire, if there's a plumbing problem, if somebody, are the conditions safe so people aren't going in areas they're not supposed to, and things of that nature. The same with the community center. I've been told that we do not necessarily have coverage. will turn around. There are times where, because of staffing shortages, they will ask the police to go lock up a building, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have coverage in one of our facilities, which is one of our assets, by any employee. So it's basically unprotected, for a lack of a better term, for maintenance and response reason. And that's an insurance liability, and by all accounts, significant. So I told Scott that to adjust his schedule, he's been working with both Mark and Jackson to make schedule adjustments to meet that need. However, based on the schedule for basketball and practices and things that will need access to the facility, he needs additional staffing to make sure, or he projects he's going to need additional staffing to cover the facility during open hours. We are going to be passing any costs for manpower on to the lease agreements when people want to rent the Schlater Center or rent the community center. And then as recent as today, the CDC came out with information that the spread of the COVID virus is very, very low on surfaces, which, well, the reason I bring that up is because right now we've been doing deep cleaning of every facility with equipment that we've got through Trustee Weiss, facilities after they've been used, and we may be able to forego that to some extent, which will save people who are renting the facilities cost. So, but we may have to offset it with manpower. But that's where that additional money comes in that he is requesting for staffing. Resurfacing the skate park, the seal coating of the parking lot and the outside surfaces. Going back to what the board has said, stay below the baseline. Scott and I can go back and see if there's a way we can make that happen through the baseline. But that's the direction of the board, right? I'm assuming we're doing it with every other department. Right. So Scott and I will go back and look at this. And as we move this forward, I just want to say to the board, the reason we're bringing forward the items above the baseline is to make sure it's clear and detailed and explained by each department what those needs are as we're doing the budget process. It was to make sure that the board had the full sense of the limits on our financial resources, but yet the essential services and functions that still need to be carried out.
You started this a while back so that we could see everything capital improvement wise. I mean, that's the whole goal of it. It doesn't mean yay or nay. It means bring it to our attention so we can decide as a whole group if it's warranted or not.
Yes. When we talk about capital improvements, just like we spoke about the boat over in the fire department, there is one capital improvement we should give serious look to and find a way to make it happen. And we can do that, again, if we come into some money in the upcoming year, earmark the fireboat and then earmark the roof at the Schlater Center.
I mean, we were supposed to do that last year, were we not, Greg? And we had to table it.
Yeah, the roof's been on the radar for a while, and the biggest concern we should have there is that with the roof leak and any damage to the interior of the building, including the wooden floor and things of that nature, you know, it's we could be walking over nickels to pick up pennies, so to speak. For us not to turn around and give a look at taking care of that roof, and then all of a sudden something happens and the floor is, you know, damaged, and then we can't provide facilities for people to play basketball or whatever other services they receive by utilizing the Schlater Center, just doesn't make sense to me logically that we shouldn't give that a priority.
Hey, Scott, has there been any more issues? I mean, with the roof leaking that from last year?
No, we had some small repairs done a little over a year ago now, and just sealing up, some replacing hardware more or less on the roof, some screws that had come out over the years and that type of thing. With those repairs that were done, we haven't had the same issue with pockets of water accumulating and breaking through the insulation. So to date, with those minor repairs, it's held up so far.
The reason I asked that is 'cause we had a lot of snow during that month, and I didn't know if that, if we had any leakage from that. That's what I asked.
So far, so good with it.
Okay.
Dealing with.
This is
And
one,
then Greg, if I may, too, the 5,818 above the base budget that I'm requesting for other professional services. Without that amount, we'd have to look at getting rid of some programs or some things. That is the, normal operations amount that is needed just to continue, like our baseball, softball umpires, basketball referees, those types of things. So that additional amount would be to cover actual expenses that are projected. And without that amount, then we have to look at cutting some programs or services.
it's a chicken and egg thing, because if we can't afford to staff people to keep the building open, then we're not going to have programs and we're not going to need the referees.
Right.
So, I mean, it's because of the board's direction of going back and pulling everything under the baseline budget. Scott and I are going to have to look at and see, okay, if we're going to maintain these programs, this is what we need. Where do we take it to rob Peter to pay Paul, so to speak?
Yeah. No, I just wanted to make sure that was clear and just point that out while I had the chance.
Anything further on parks? The next one is special details. This is a new department we set up 2 years ago. I wanted to pull the Marina, Zion Benton Township basketball security, as well as St. Patrick's traffic control out of the operating budget of the police department and make it, I didn't want the commingling of expenditures to impact the department 11 police department budget. So this year, however, because of COVID, we didn't have a St. Pat's. The school was open, school was closed, that type of scenario. Zion Benton was remote in person. We don't know what the fall will bring. I am less likely to agree with the police chiefs on going back to the St. Pat's account. And I think it's in unincorporated Wadsworth. I could be wrong. But the Zion Benton, I think that merits discussion. I know we just did a rate increase on the Zion Benton account. If I'm correct, I think Mike Sheedy took care of that about a year ago.
That's correct, right before COVID.
Right. And then the Marina, it's our normal security contract with the Marina, but I've been looking at total cost of operation on that, and there is no money being made. It's almost revenue neutral. When you talk about the insurance and the training and everything else is total cost. So I am less inclined for us to continue to provide contract security through that with the police department. With the Marina next year, especially since there are, it can potentially pose a conflict of interest when we're trying to do enforcement measures down there, and our people have the contract down there. So I'd like us to, my recommendation will be next year to take a serious look on a cost benefit analysis and present it to the board to see if we should even be continuing that at the Marina. But that being said, we do have a contract this year, and that contract is the department's projected to be $15,000 or 35.8% under budget for 2021. No increase is requested. No capital improvements are requested.
Just so everyone knows, on that first page under Department 17 Special Police Details, the very first line that's written in there, it says fiscal year 21-22 a budget with a base of, says 64,166. That should be 41,726. Just to clear that
That's
up.
a typo. There are a couple typos. There are a couple typos from the transfer of the templates. So we'll tweak those when we put the finished product out before the board.
When I looked at that, I couldn't understand where the 64 was coming from because I didn't see it anywhere else. But that's why I pointed it out to Greg. I just want everyone else to know that too.
Department 19 Information Technology, we're anticipating a $6,267 below budget, or 4%. They're requesting an increase of 5,093 or 3.29%. The only reason they're requesting the increase is because they are now taking on all the communications for the entire village. So cell phones and VoIP were being done. VoIP was being done by IT, but the cell phones and the various cell phone accounts, multiple accounts, were being done by each individual department had their own communication line. So we're going to consolidate that, and I've given direction to Mike to look at putting everything under one contract so we don't have multiple contracts, and let's see if we can potentially gain some cost efficiencies by that consolidation. But if we ever have a problem with our cell phones now, whether it's Tim and his people out in the field or whoever staff, we turn around and we call Mike Sheedy anyway to get something taken care of generally, sometimes Chief Brumlick. So this just makes perfect sense to take those lines away from the village departments and put them all to IT.
That's why a lot of the communication lines don't have a balance in it.
That's correct. That's why you see zero on those lines as we go through the budget.
I questioned that to Greg today, and that's what he told me. So.
And then the operating fund for the two enterprise funds, water and sewer, both of them are coming in below budget. There are some requested capital improvements. Some of those are funded by the restricted fund itself. So we are going to approve, or I would hope that the village board would allow us to approve, but we're going to move forward with this village infrastructure master plan. This will assist us greatly with identifying our sewers. Basically, we did the road rehabilitation plan several years ago. This is going to be it for water and sewer. So that's basically what we're looking at.
And it's 48,400 for water and 24,200 for sewer. Correct?
We're going to make a similar request in the TIF for the TIF district. The same thing, an infrastructure plan that'll be funded by TIF, not the general fund. And then we also have for sewer, we are going to secure a sewer camera for Tim. He's been asking for it for a number of years. This will allow him to identify leaks by deploying the camera. Sometimes he cannot get access to a camera from a neighboring community that's of a quality that he can use effectively. That being said, he is allowed $21,000 out of the restricted funds for that, and it will be augmented with the IPRF grant for this year of $15,000. And that grant money's already been awarded. I'll be bringing it to the board for approval. And then 24,002 on the master plan.
Exactly. Yes.
When it comes to the master plan, so we have the road plan. Now we would have these plans. Is there an easy way to overlay those for, long-term planning to be able to look and prioritize and say, oh yeah, this area where we're doing roads also needs sewer? Is that just a matter of, Tim and his expertise being able to piece that together?
Tim?
That's absolutely the thought process. All of it is based on grant funding. I mean, it's obvious that we're not going to pay for millions of dollars of water mains or sewer main replacement. So, with our sewer mains that are on the east side of town, and probably 40% of the town run right down the middle of the road. So, putting all that together, is obviously the goal. And once that gets done, you're actually paying for your road replacement through the water sewer fund and not MFT or LPA funds or even any in-house funds. You get a couple bangs for your buck, but you need that grant money to do it.
I would add this to what Tim just said, because it's an excellent point. We've been fortunate in securing some funding and having some items being put up on the radar down in Springfield for a number of reasons. And one of them is the ability for us to have shovel-ready projects. And when we turn around and they say, what roads do you have? We can take the road rehab project or the road rehab plan and show our years on where we're at and what we've accomplished so far and be able to present that. That's the same thing we would look to do moving forward with the water and the sewer plan, is to go ahead and present those. That being said, we've been in close contact with Congressman Schneider's office, and we fully anticipate that the infrastructure bill will be signed into law. They're still doing negotiations on it. One of the first things they want to do is nationwide replacement of lead pipes. Lead water sewer or water. So that's a positive for us. The other thing is we'll have some projects identified that we can hand carry to the congressman's staff and the congressman. And we're saying, okay, we need $10 million for this, $5 million for this. Keeping in mind that the congressman still sits on appropriations, which is the most powerful committee in Congress. And I think there's a great opportunity there for us if we line our ducks in a row and continue to move forward with our intergovernmental plan for us to secure some funding to make some significant improvements to the village. The iron's hot. There's no hesitation on the part of the president or both sides of the chambers of Congress, and quite honestly, both Republicans and Democrats. How deep that will go is the bone of contention between the two parties. But there's no doubt from Republicans or Democrats that they want to see infrastructure move forward. But I think we can position ourselves well for that. I firmly believe that.
Yeah, well, we're going to be sitting down with Congressman Schneider at some point, hopefully in the next month or two.
Well, that's what we have as far as the general fund and the enterprise funds. The direction I understand from the board is to go back, look at every budget that has items above the baseline and figure out a way to incorporate it into the budget and bring back to the village board in our next meeting to be determined where we're going to cut and how we're going to make that happen. And then the board at that point will make the decision on what priorities will get greater focus.
Well, I will say this, and this is admittedly going to sound horrible. So the department that I am the liaison over is one of the smaller total portions of the budget. And so to try and absorb something like a $25,000 for a code enforcement, I mean, that's a tall ask within a small budget, right? So this is where I think there'll have to be some discernment on your part as you're going through to say, hey, we had that little bit of cushion in the baseline to begin with. How do we apply that? Where does that get applied? Because I think some areas will be easier to absorb those costs than others.
Yeah, I would concur. There's a difference between a $1.5 million budget and a $300,000 budget or a $200,000 budget, without a doubt. Okay, so round two will be to bring the adjusted budget. Then the third round of this in our meetings will be to put the final draft with the restricted funds in front of the board for final approval. And then move on with the extra pieces of the appropriation ordinance subsequent to that. If I'm hearing the direction from the board correctly.
Yeah, I think that's, and again, I'll add, I think others have said it too. I mean, this is a great amount of detail in here, the justifications that people are making. It's not easy, and certainly I don't think any of us take for granted the asks that are there and the very real needs that we have for our community. But really appreciate the everyone who had a part in putting this together.
And I think it makes you look at, if we really do need these things, how can we as a board come up with, not that it's easy, but how do you come up with more revenue? And I won't say it because I don't want to be chastised, but there's other ways to get revenue. But then that's a hard decision. Do you want to do that? Do you want to improve your community? Or do you just want to lay dormant and say, well, I didn't do that. I didn't have a part of it, talking about any bit of that. It's the hard questions that have to be answered that people don't want to do ever. And that's why we're doing this right now. We're doing this to show, hey, this is the money we have. How can we come up with more? What can we do? Or we cut, and then nobody wants to cut. But how do you not cut, but still provide without doing anything about it? That's the hard truth of the whole matter. And it's part of government. It's why you're elected. People elect you to figure that stuff out for them, so they don't have to do that. But you can't just sit back and say, well, that's not good. You can't do that. You can't do this. Come up with a solution, not a problem to the problem. That's all I got on that one.
I also have to, any comments before we adjourn? Any other trustees?
I'll begin working with the staff tomorrow, Mr. Mayor and members of the board.
All right, everybody's okay, and that's direction you want, have Greg contact and stay within the budget. Okay. I think that's all we have, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Don't need any motion, so I guess the next item would be ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second. All right. Roll call.
Target,
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Marabella,
Aye.
McCarthy,
Aye.
Weiss,
Aye.
Whitmore.
Aye.
All right, great. Meeting adjourned.
Good night.
Have a
Thank you.
great